Pushy Broad from the Bronx on TransformationTalkRadio.com. Welcome, Transformation Talk Radio listeners. My name is Ellen Stewart, and I am the Pushy Broad from the Bronx. Welcome to my show, Recovery Recharged, with the illustrious co-host, Dr. Pat. How you doing, Doc?
Oh, it's great to be here. Yeah. Just got all warmed up here in the past hour, and I'm ready to go. This is a powerful topic today.
It really always is. Yeah. It really is. We do some great things here. This is the beginning of our third year for Recovery Recharged. We always bring to the table something that somebody can come away with, a resource, a situation that somebody can really learn something from. And today is no different. The topic today really says it all. And that is, does my child need help? There are so many parents out there that try so hard to help their child in so many ways. Yeah. Especially with what's happening with the pandemic, we're still not out of the woods yet. We're still in a situation that has just created an abundance of anxiety and depression, especially for teens and young adults. So I thought that I would bring on an expert today that is going to talk about how this anxiety and depression, coupled with drugs and alcohol and other risky behaviors, has just created a superstorm. And more importantly, what this particular doctor says we can do about it to help our children in need. So I am going to bring to the table today, to Recovery Recharged, Dr. Christopher Grant. But before I have him say hi, I'm going to tell you why he's such an expert today. Dr. Grant works for Caron Treatment Centers in Wernersville, Pennsylvania, and that is a treatment center that has 65 years experience treating addiction and co-occurring disorders. Dr. Grant himself is the psychologist and clinical supervisor of teen and young adult male services, and he has been doing this for quite some time. He's practicing as a psychologist for 15 years. His experience is in treating individuals with depression, anxiety, bipolar disorder, and also, of course, addiction. So, Recovery Recharge, Dr. Pat and I are very happy to welcome to our show Dr. Chris Grant. How you doing today, Doc?
I'm doing very well. Thank you for having me. I'm excited.
You're welcome. You're welcome. We're delighted. I'm going to put two questions to you right up front so we can get started. And the first one is, talk to us about how the pandemic has affected adolescents and adults, and just talk a little bit about anxiety and depression and how it correlates with substance misuse. Okay?
Okay.
I know it's a mouthful out of the gate, but I know you can do it. I know you can do it.
All right. So first off, like, the pandemic, as we know, has been very difficult. We're approaching our second year of this, or we're rounding out year two, I guess.
Right now, we are.
Right now, yeah. I remember 2 years ago when the governor was like, let's shut everything down. And we knew from the start that this was going to be totally different for all of us. So we didn't know what it was going to look like. One of the ways that has continued to affect us is that it's thrown our anxiety through the roof. And it seems like there's one thing after another that we have to worry about. And that's before we are concerned, like, we have to have concerns about our families. And so we have job stresses, we have school stress, we have, how is this going to affect us financially? And then we have all the other things that have come along, all these external, wars that we have to worry about, and all that. Right? And that we just lump into this 2 years, which has been stressful for us all. For kids specifically, Ellen, they're often forgotten when it comes to, like, how to manage these things, how to manage the stress, how to manage anxiety. And we could see it showing up in them in different ways. Now, to answer your second question about how do we notice depression and anxiety, two things I always tell parents to pay attention to first: sleep and appetite. So if they sleep and appetite are off, then we know that there's that we probably need to take some action.
Okay. So I would have thought you would have said it's really something, Pat, right? Because I thought he would have said schoolwork or trouble or something, but sleep and appetite, that's kind of interesting. Does that happen to you too?
Yeah,
Doc?
I think what we're talking about here is we're talking about for the first time in a really long time, holistically looking at this. Holistic, right? Because a lot of times we leave this out or we leave that out or we forget really what the turmoil is, and let me just give you one simple example. When we went through 07, 8, and 9, and we did the show then too, and we had an enormous amount of listeners because nobody was working. Remember that point in time, people got just cut, just gone. You're terminated. And we never really talked about that. It was as if one day you went through the hell in your life, your family. I had a friend of mine who was a human potential leader who was living in a tent in Sacramento. And we went through that period and we never addressed the children. We went through that and we're like, Dad lost the job, we lost the house. Then magically, we came out of it. A lot of people didn't, but we never looked at the children from that generation.
Right. Today, well, speaking of, go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah. But today, the world we're living in there is some reality for today that is undeniable. And I just wonder, how are we doing with our kids? Is anybody addressing, the post-traumatic stress of COVID, the fact that we're watching war happening in front of us, climate change, which kids are really affected by, they get it more than we do. And yet, as adults, we are the missing link, aren't we?
All right.
We have lost our radar to figure out what's going on.
It's very true. And Pat, to your point, like the kids that were affected back in 07, 08, and 09, they're the college students that are struggling right now. They're the ones that, they're the ones experiencing that depression and anxiety. And some of them are also, we could also loop into the 9/11 generation. The folks, the kids that are growing up in this post 9/11 world, we have the benefit of knowing what life was like prior to that. It's like we have the benefit of knowing what life is like prior to COVID and how to manage things. But our children, young adults, they're struggling because they're trying to figure out what's this going to look like when it's my turn to take the wheel. And I'm not sure if we're setting them up to be in the driver's seat.
Well, you see this all day long, and and your age group is teens to young adults. And like you said, there's a lot of anxiety and depression going on. So what do you see? How do kids come in, be really specific with their physicality and what they're saying, and then tell me how it correlates to substance misuse?
When it comes to anxiety, so a couple of things that you mentioned, like we're seeing struggles in school. What used to be doing well, now my grades are dropping. Same thing with depression. I'm isolating from my family as well. My relationships with my family, with my friends, they've all gone downhill. How it correlates to that substance use? Well, now, because I don't have any friends, I'm not interacting with my family. I'm isolating more. I'm using on my own. Right? I'm using as a way to cope. So we have a lot of kids who come into us. This is actually very common. Right? They said over the last 2 years, they're isolated from their friends and their family, just gave them more opportunities to smoke. Right? And then same thing, their anxiety is pretty high. So they found a way to self-medicate, which is very common. Even kids these days will use that term because they're aware of what they're trying to do, what they're trying to accomplish through their substance use.
So do you think that there are some groups of adolescents and young adults that are more vulnerable than others to substance misuse coupled with anxiety and depression?
Yeah. Great question.
Yeah. So that is a great question. We know our sexual minorities, like our adolescents, young adults who are on the LGBTQ community, they struggle they struggle so much, and we see that quite often. They're often in hiding. They have a hard time talking about their issues, feeling like, as if they're going to be judged. Um, we also have even the high achievers, which we often don't think about the high achievers as being those that will use, but they're trying to find a way to cope with the pressure that one they feel society's putting on them, and then as well the pressure that they put on themselves.
And the pressure that their parents are putting on them.
Oh, definitely too.
I remember handling working with a child in high school who was 17 years old, and parents said, "My child is great. She's just smoking socially, okay, and she's very up on things, and she's taking 5 advanced placement classes pre-college, and she's on 2 different sports teams, and she's always moving, she's always going. There's no way that she's suffering." And in the meantime, this girl trying to live up to her parents' expectations was a hardcore heroin addict, because she could not live up to all of the things that she was supposed to. And what she thought she was supposed to do was well beyond what she should be doing. So overachievers is something that parents have to look out for all the time, right?
Yeah.
Not only not living up to your potential, but living up to your potential and exceeding that.
Yeah. Yeah. And I want to go back to something you said, because you touched upon something that I think is worth mentioning again. When it comes to addiction, alcoholism, whether it's drugs, alcoholism, eating, I don't care what it is, the most invisible group out there at the moment. And what do I mean by invisible? The rate by which the numbers are coming in with addiction, right? And especially young people. Even though the world has changed and the United States has changed, kinda, is what you mentioned, and that's the LGBTQ community. And I mean, just recently we saw a case in Florida where a student was suspended for using or saying the word gay. So the idea of trying to remain invisible or trying to be something you're not, especially around young people, how is that faring in the world we live in today? Because, Dr. Grant, we've never had more things to compare ourselves to than the world we're living in today. I mean, I can't afford those sneakers, so I'm not wearing them.
Yeah, and that is such a challenge. We're constantly comparing ourselves, and I even hear this on the adolescent unit. Like they even compare themselves on the drugs that they use. Like, I know we focus a lot on identity, and it's great because we want people to feel comfortable with who they are. And I think the risk of that as well is that it allows for so much comparison, and we don't often have the language and the ways to address it, especially with our young folks who are trying to figure out how to navigate this world. Yeah, and often the way that they figure out how to find their way is by connecting with those who are like-minded. Unfortunately, that would often involve sometimes involve drug use as well. And yeah, I understand the function behind that behavior, while at the same time it breaks my heart that that's where they're choosing to go. Yeah.
You're absolutely right. So when I talk to parents many times, and when they're trying to make the decision how to help, many times parents say, "Well, it's just a phase, and my kid, I did it, so it's okay if they do it, and marijuana is not so bad, and we're legalizing it, and it's fine, and if the kid is vaping, at least it's not nicotine or blah blah blah, all of that stuff." Dr. Grant, what are the risk factors, and talk a little bit about what marijuana can do to a developing brain.
Ooh, so I'm going to ask first, do you want the easy answer or the long answer?
We want the one that's going to hit home. Okay.
The one that hits home.
Yeah.
So, well, right away, there are immediate changes to the brain with marijuana use, as well as chronic long-term changes to the brain functioning. And I always also remind parents, because I hear that a lot, right? Parents will say, I smoked when I was, in the 60s, 70s, or a lot of our parents are children of the 80s. They'll say, I did that. So why should I even bother to address this with my kid? Marijuana, cannabis now is nothing like the cannabis that was smoked 60s, 70s. And even in the 80s and going into the 90s, this stuff is more potent. The THC levels are so much higher in the cannabis that we have now versus 30 years ago, even I would say even up to 10, 15 years ago.
Yep, that's right.
So that's why we have to be concerned about it. And because of how potent it is, it's causing more brain changes, more cognitive deficits compared to the marijuana that was smoked, decades ago. Right. So we're seeing more memory impairment. Short-term memory suffers, long-term memory suffers as well. More problems with attention. So I can't focus in class, which is one thing that we constantly hear. Even on our unit, we'll hear they go up to school twice a day. I don't know what I'm doing. I can't focus. Changes to sleep, of course. I'm not sleeping well because I can't sleep without my stuff. And changes to appetite. Yeah. And the changes, whereas before, you'd go through a week without use, and you can go, you will see the brain will repair itself. It's much longer now, which is unfortunate, because the message is it's safer because, I'm vaping it, or it's not like the stuff from the 70s. But that's such a misnomer, a lot of misinformation when it comes to, cannabis now.
Yeah. And that really is the gap, isn't it? Mm-hmm. Misinformation, I think, is one of the greatest challenges we have of our technology, but also when it comes to safety and well-being. Can we talk for a minute on availability? What do I mean? Do we have more resources available today than we did 10 years ago? Are we making any progress in that way? And I'm not talking in general, because we are talking about teens. We are talking about, children. So I just want to focus on that group. I'm just curious about what you're seeing. And is it easier in a lot of ways for a young person to get help? See, that's the question I'm not even sure I know the answer to.
I understand where you're coming from. So I'm a product of the outpatient world before I was in residential treatment. And I'd like to say, yes, there is access. And at the same time, I see statistics that are showing that, more people who want treatment are being either denied or told that they have to wait, mainly because we don't have enough practitioners. We don't have enough practitioners to share their wealth, or the areas where the help is needed, there are just not enough practitioners. So there's information there. Thankfully, there are more providers doing Zoom, virtual meetings, which is helpful, very helpful. There's some challenges when it comes to relationship, and I don't have to get into that part. At the same time, the information is also out there for parents to be able to research, for the teens to also be able to access, to help them to know if they have a problem, and what to do about it.
Well, if there are more doctors like you going directly where help is needed, then there's certainly hope for us. That's for sure. On a personal note, what made you decide to work for this treatment center and for this particular age group?
Well, I have a passion for this age group. I started my career in mental health, working in another residential facility with this same age group. It was 13 to 18-year-olds at the time. And I loved it, one, because they're kids. And I also love it because I still feel like I'm a kid. We'll talk cartoons and video games and sports and all that. So, and it's fun. I decided to make the jump to residential 2 years ago, which happened to be in the middle of a pandemic as well. Strange time to make a job change. Mainly because I wanted to get more experience and help people who are in an acute and crisis that we see in residential. And they said, "Hey, would you mind working with the kids?" I said, "Absolutely." Right? Yeah. I also have kids the same age as the kids I work with, so my own kids are the same age as the kids I work with at work. And I tell my kids at home, I'm doing what I'm doing so I can understand them, and also have them so I can understand the kids that I work with. It helps. And then I also know about the video games that my kids are playing, which is helpful, right? Or the things that they're watching.
Yeah.
And I can relate to them.
Yeah. And I want to ask you about this is because you just brought it up about what they're doing, what they're playing. And I was just searching so that I could bring this up and refer to it really quickly, but I know it. I'm like Ellen. I work with people, especially young people in addiction and recovery. And one of the ladies about a year ago said to me, "If you want to understand me, watch this television show." And the show is called Euphoria. And of course, we all love Zendaya. I mean, honestly, we do, and whatever she's in. And I watched it and I'm hooked on it, I will say, but I'm also a little bit disturbed by it. And I try to be objective about this. And I often ask myself from a very naive perspective, is this really what kids go through? And I stepped back from it a little bit and I said, they really do go through this. Maybe it's not as Hollywoodish.
Right.
But they do go through it. They do go through the temptation to expose their bodies on the internet, or the temptation to try a drug because it is something the latest thing, or the group pressure to do things. So while the show itself at first seemed extreme, what I realized is I think I've been out of the loop, to be honest with you. And that's really the question I want to ask you. Where is the gap in those of us that are even in the field, but imagine parents now trying to navigate these waters? How do we help them with this? How do we help them, pick up on the fact that, yeah, your kid's asleep at his or her desk, and that could be an issue. There's more to it than this, right?
Right. I remember the first time one of the patients I was working with actually cued me onto Euphoria. And I rarely will watch a show like that. But what he said was, if you want to understand my situation,
exactly,
that show. And he was living the life just like the main character.
Yep.
Scrape away all the Hollywood stuff, right? You really get what our youth are going through, right? The drug use, right? The putting themselves in sexual situations, or precarious relationships, very abusive relationships, the parental struggles that they have, the struggles of parents with their kids, right? Where the gap is that as our children still want the same things generation after generation, it might just look a little different. Adults have lost how to relate to them, how to have the boundaries with them that they need. They forgot how to provide some of that nurturing that children need, because adults are also feeling this pressure to maintain what society needs, sometimes keep up with other people in society. And I think that's where the gap is.
Yeah.
And I think it's highlighted in that show as well.
Yeah, it was. And the reason I ask you that question, I know we're talking about a number of these different things today, and we're going to cover, Ellen's going to really walk us through, some of these other factors, right? Especially around treatment. What I think the show misses a little bit, and maybe I got to wait till next season, but it isn't the only show like that. But there are very few really that go to a solution based. And that show does really touch on the realm of things, right? But that's part two here, Ellen, of what we're talking about, because while it may be more complicated, right? While there may be changes from the marijuana when I grew up, right? While there may be fill in your own blank, we now have the possibility, though, of reaching more, right? Reaching more. We have technology, we have apps. But I think we got to step up our game. What do you two think?
Well, first of all, we are going to step up our game, and that's exactly what Dr. Grant is going to do when we come back from commercial break, because we're going to talk about when do we put the pedal to the metal? When do we put kids into treatment? How they get treatment? And most importantly, does treatment work? We're going to talk about that and choosing the right place. So stay with us. We'll be right back with Recovery Recharge, Dr. Pat and Dr. Grant.
Thank you.
All clear, everybody?
Are you ready to put down that drink or drug for good? Are you struggling to maintain your recovery from addictive behaviors? Do you need help with a family member or loved one who's in early recovery or battling addiction? Get the help and guidance you need by arranging a Recovery Recharged phone session with me, Ellen Stewart, Pushy Broad from the Bronx, certified life and recovery coach. Call 1-800-889-1757. Make an appointment today or go to my website, pushybroadfromthebronx.com, and click on the link that says Recovery Recharged. Don't wait. Get the help you need today. This is Ellen Stewart, Pushy Broad from the Bronx on TransformationTalkRadio.com.
There isn't a magic pill to creating your healthy lifestyle, yet it doesn't have to be hard or feel impossible. Health works from the inside out, connecting both your body and your mind. Georgette LePage lives and breathes what she teaches, so allow her to be living proof of what can work for you. Connect with her now for a free 30-minute discovery session to see what results you are looking for and how she can help you get them. Visit GeorgetteLePage.com.
Boy, does this feel like good times today. It's so great to have all of you tune us in and turn us on. I love it. This is a show that's going to invite all of you to open up your heart, because it's about dreams coming true. There's a road we get to take as we craft out and we lay a course that's in service of so many others. Sometimes the universe, God, whatever you believe in, have you ever wondered why, but better than why, or how the universe knows how to line things up in a way that gets you ready for the most expansive part of who you're going to become? This is the time to change. And gratitude, leading with love, opens up more expansive possibilities than you can imagine. Crust busting your way to an awesome life. I want to thank you all for tuning us in, turning us on TransformationTalkRadio.com.
Hi, I'm Coach Martez.
And I'm licensed therapist with Drina Layton.
We want to invite you to join us on the Coach Martez and with Drina Layton show, where we discuss understanding love, accepting truth, and changing your perspectives.
Relationships are the currency to life, and so many couples find themselves broke in their relationships. We want you to join us for a lively discussion and practical tips and insights on how to turn things around and gain the Married for Life mindset.
Hi, I'm Mary Jane Mack, and yes, our office is open, and we are doing strictly phone consultations. If you would like to call and get tuned up, it's perfect time with everything that's going on and things aren't calming down. Pick up the phone and give us a call. It's quick and easy, and it's fun. If you'd like more information on it, you can look at maryjanemack.com or call our office at 888-777-4232.
And I got to bring you back, Pat. Sorry to interrupt. Yep.
Welcome back, Transformation Talk Radio listeners. I'm Ellen Stewart. This is Recovery Recharged, and I'm here with Dr. Pat and Dr. Chris Grant from Caron Treatment Centers, CARON Treatment Centers in Wernersville, Pennsylvania, Florida, and Atlanta. 65 years of treating addiction and co-occurring disorders. And I happen to know this place very well, and it's one of the top places in the country, surely. And we have an expert today in adolescent and young adult addiction and co-occurring disorders. And we are back in this conversation to talk about how do we know when it's time to tell parents, or how do parents know it's time to put my kid in residential treatment? What happens, Chris? Does something really happen where there's a great big situation and the cops are called and things are happening, or can it be something else? Talk about that.
Great question.
That is a great question. So it doesn't have to be a major crisis situation, and there are times where that's what happens. I tell parents, it's great that you trusted your gut to get your child in the treatment, right? Because sometimes we know our kids, we know when things are off, and if we've told them and have addressed the substance use, and we're not seeing a change, or we're not seeing they're able to stop themselves, refrain from use, or if we're noticing that they're escalating their use, switching onto a different substance, then we really know that's when it's time to seek treatment. Okay? Don't wait, of course. Start, you can start small, do your research on your own before you decide to take that step. Sometimes the problems can be addressed in outpatient, but if we're noticing that there's an escalation or there's not a change over time, then it's time for residential.
And then, I don't want to just assume this question. I want to ask it directly. A lot of times parents get caught in the cycle of I don't know-ism, and yet picking up the phone and calling y'all might be like the simplest solution to that, right? Because if you haven't been through this, you don't know what you don't know. And to think that this is going to work out like it would if your car needed gas in it and you just go pull in and refuel it, that is a major mistake. And I encourage both parents and children alike to reach out and have a conversation. You can't think you know this if you've never been through it. Right, Ellen?
Absolutely. I mean, this is a really big deal. And this is why we work, and I work as a recovery coach before treatment, pre-treatment, and post-treatment, because many parents come to me and say, how do I know the difference between a phase and something serious? How do I know whether or not my child needs residential treatment? So tell me what you see, Dr. Grant. Talk about the actual kids that are in treatment. Do they identify themselves as addicts or alcoholics, or how do they come to you in the first week or so of treatment? Tell us about that.
Some will come right out of the gate acknowledging that they have an addiction. Now, these are also the ones who have been through maybe some treatment before, or they are coming from a situation such as they had a DUI, or they have other legal issues that are highlighting, I have a problem. Right? Now, some also come in with this misinformation that cannabis use or maybe alcohol use is okay because they see it in the community. And so they don't feel like if it's something that is acceptable, socially acceptable, then it can't be an addiction. Right? And that's where that conflict between what is reality and what's misinformation often butts heads. I would say a lot of our guys, they may come in not saying that they're not an addict. By the time they leave, we are able to show them that it's not just one thing that makes you an addict. There's a set of behaviors that contribute to that.
Can we talk a little bit about that when you talk about a set of behaviors? Because people turn around and say, well, can I get addicted if I do something just once or I'm just doing this socially? How do I know that I have a problem? Okay. That's the most simple and basic thing for parents to know and for children to know when they go into treatment.
And let's really break this down simplistically, because as an employer, like, you walk through the door, I am spotting your red eyes and the fact that you are not tracking during a meeting. And I can't say anything because we just can't. We're not allowed to, right? But we know how to flag it. What you're about to share is going to help others, but doesn't it really start with issues of powerlessness?
Powerlessness, yes.
Yeah.
That's often,
I can't go to school without getting a hit. That's not normal.
Or I can't go to sleep without taking a hit, right? Or I can't spend time around my family without taking a hit, right? Yeah. And that's things that we'll point out.
Or I can't go into social situations. I don't know how to party without getting high, right? Big one, right? I don't know how to be in a social situation without having a drink or taking a hit or doing a line or something like that, right? The difference between that. So it's always about frequency of use. Yes. How often and how much.
And how much. And if they're shifting from one substance to the next, which is showing the escalation in use, it's also a concern. Because they're putting themselves open to like so many problems, at risk for more behaviors that can ultimately get them in more trouble. And that's also things that we point out to them. Lying is another one. I have to lie to my parents. I have to lie to my girlfriend about not using. Like if you have to tell someone that you're not using, maybe that's a problem.
You're right. All right. So I want to ask you one important question, and then I want to talk to you about what actually happens in treatment and what somebody can expect, because nobody really knows unless you're there. And we want to make it comfortable for parents and comfortable for parents to talk about with their children. So here's the big question. How do parents have this conversation with their child? How do they turn around to their child and say, we need to get you help and you need to go to residential treatment? How does that happen?
With a lot of tears. There's a lot of tears, a lot of swallowing your pride as a parent to be able to say, you got something going on and I am not the one to help you. Right. And that's where parents have to start, right? They have to swallow their pride. They have to understand that someone else is going to be in charge of making sure their child is getting better. But the best thing is that we can only do this and do this successfully with the parent support. So we get the parents on board. Right? So we're not just going to say, hey, we're going to do this with your child and you stay out of it. Now we're going to bring the parent in. We're going to point out parts of the relationship, the family dynamic that is probably not the only thing, but contributing to the pattern of use. Right? For parents to start that conversation though, just do your research ahead of time to say, hey, this is what I'm concerned about. This is what I'm noticing. And we need to take some steps to make sure that this is not an ongoing problem.
Yeah. I want to just ask you about this because it does tend to be a little bit confusing. And I just really want to make sure we say it again and again and again. This thing that we're referencing, I consider it adult past comparison. That's what I consider it, where denial leads the brain for parents not seeing that even one event of a child using or drinking at a time when 99% of the people don't, that's a flag, right? We talked about going to school, taking music lessons, performing in the band, play. I mean, you name it. We're so quick to justify because we reflect back to a past where we were doing it and it was okay. And that, I think, is one of the greatest disservices that we can create for our kids. What do you both think?
Well, like Dr. Grant said, today is a different world. It's just totally a different world, and understanding that the type of drugs that are out there, the way people can access them, the how quickly things are accumulated. If just someone understands, it's not the world of 50 years ago. It's not the world of 35 years ago when I first got clean and sober. Okay. It's just not. It's a totally different world. So admitting that we have to really bring ourselves into the 21st century and learn about not only the misuse, but about the treatment, which makes it the most important thing, how treatment has evolved, because we never would have had this before. Dr. Pat, you and I, what did we have? We had the rooms. That's what we had.
Actually, we had juvie. You got so it's like, where I grew up, you got sent to, like, in the Bronx, you got sent to juvie, right?
Tell me about it. Or in a straitjacket in Fordham Hospital, like me, with an overdose. With Thorazine. Yeah, exactly. That's what I had. So just knowing that these things are possible. For instance, I mean, I do know Karen Treatment Centers personally, and for anybody that wants to know how to get in touch with Dr. Grant or that program, it is caron.org. Please do that, or please call me at my 800 number, which is 889-1757, or go to my website, Pushy Broad from the Bronx. I will hook you up with the right resources and give you the answers you need to help your children. But in the meantime, right now, Dr. Grant, tell us what it's like in residential treatment for a child. What happens in the course of a day? What kind of treatment do they actually get?
And let's explain to the population that's listening what we mean by residential treatment.
So residential treatment is just like it sounds. You go there, you're staying there 28 to 30 days. Right? You have access to, your meals, a bed, which is fantastic. And at the same time, you're getting some really intense treatment. It's a mix of group therapy, individual therapy, family therapy, psychological assessments when needed, psychiatric evaluations as well. For some patients, that also includes medication management. A typical day, for our teens, there's school in the morning, followed by group, another group, their lunchtime, their rec time, which honestly, with our adolescent males, those are the two best times of their day, when it's lunch and rec, right? Which I understand. They need to get some of that the physical edge out of, their anxiety and their depression. And there's more group and school. And then in the evenings, they have their meetings. And talking to our residents, that's the time that they find that they get the most out of it. Which, I don't mind that, even if they're not talking, talking to me is not the best thing, I can live with that. Right? But if they're able to find something meaningful through the meetings that they attend, then I know that we're doing something right. For our young adult patients, it also includes attending lectures in our lecture hall, in addition to the groups and then individual sessions that they receive as well.
Yeah. I was really struck by the level of different programs you had. And I think we should mention some of this, because what's very impressive about what you all are doing is you're really looking at some of the latest ways that we can reframe or change really what we're talking about recovery. Specifically, I was thrilled to see integrative neurofeedback because we have to be able to take advantage of some of these, contemporary ways to address what people are going through. I mean, that's part of the landscape also of what you all provide, isn't it?
Yeah. Yes, we do integrative neurofeedback, and it's not for everyone, but for those that receive it and those that go through it, they talk about how much it's benefited. They think it's like some sort of like science fiction stuff that they're like, oh my goodness, I don't know how I'm going to benefit from it. And then they come out of it saying, you know what, I'm able to see, one, how my anxiety, is impacting my life, and I no longer have to hide from it. Another thing, Pat, that we also offer is trauma programming, and we provide even just the basic. This is what trauma looks like, and coping skills for it. We also provide EMDR. We have a number of trained EMDR providers on campus, and not just for the adults, but even for our adolescents and young adults, which is fantastic. Because I think about all the adults that I've worked with, even in the outpatient world, who continue to struggle with substance use, and they said after a while, it's from what I went through as a kid. Like, I have these memories, I have these thoughts that I can't get rid of. So EMDR is really great for this population.
Yeah. Thank you. And that's why I brought it up, because, these are the tools that those of us that are adults that live in this world, we count on a regular basis, because we never know from time to time what's going to pop up, what gets triggered. I mean, there's just so much now that you all have done to really bring the state of the art solution for people. Ellen, I want to talk a little bit, if we could, about relapse, if for a moment. And we use that term relapse. I use the term relapse. People call it other things, like slipped, like whatever you call it. There are some people that struggle. What are you seeing, Dr. Grant? What are you seeing in terms of your observation of how these young people adapt to their new world?
Well, I know I see a lot of guys who come out, or who start out, I should say, a lot of uncertainty, a lot of anxiety, a lot of fear about what this recovery life is going to be like for them. And we help them to reduce all that emotion about the recovery life, so that way when they leave us, they can fly into recovery, we know that they're starting off well. Right? The statistics show that the first 90 days after treatment are the most crucial. Karen, we'd like to point out that our patients, there's a 94% recovery rate for the first 90 days. But we want to continue to follow up with them. We do know that some of our patients will relapse afterward. Right? We try to tell them, and we let them know that, yes, that is part of the problem. There's not a single thing you can do to make sure that you can't relapse. Right? That you have to make sure that you're keeping yourself accountable. You have folks around you who are going to keep you accountable. You have to admit that you're powerless to this, and that surrender is going to be incredibly important. Now, someone comes back to us after they relapse, we don't shut the door on them. We don't kick them down the hill. It's open arms. Doesn't matter if they're 15 and they relapse, still open arms. Why? Because we want them to know that, it's part of the process, and we want them to receive that treatment and the care that they need.
One of the best things about Karen, and one of the best things about residential treatment, is this. In the 18 years that I'm doing this and the 12 years that I'm in private practice, one thing stands out and is evidence-based. The longer someone spends in residential treatment, the less likely they are to relapse. The second thing I found with all of my clients is the biggest relapse rates do occur not only in the first 90 days, but in the first year of relapse. Okay. I have 36 years clean and sober. I should have had 37, but oh well. Okay. My first year was a bust. Okay. It was a bust. But this is the big thing. Parents are so afraid of putting their children in residential treatment. They think they're sending them off because they themselves have done something wrong. So, Dr. Grant, I need you to address that. I need you to give them the good, hard facts. All right. I need you to tell them whether or not there's a cure for this, whether or not they were responsible for this. Okay. And I want you also, as we begin to wrap up here, tell me some of your personal success stories about kids in treatment. Okay. With the 5 minutes we have.
So parents need to know that you are not broken because your child goes to treatment. Okay. And I stress that, I emphasize that, and partly because that's also, if I had a child that ended up in treatment, I want to know that as well. Right. And I truly believe that. And I talk to parents, on a weekly basis, sometimes on a daily basis, about their child being in treatment. And I hear strong individuals. I hear strong moms and dads talking about how, how much it hurts, but they know they're doing the right thing. Right? And that's the important. Like you know your child. You can trust your gut when it comes to, to treating them, to getting them the care that they need. Right? And it can be scary because you're sending your child off to a place sometimes hundreds of miles away, across the country, and you're not hearing from them every day, but do know that they're in excellent care. Right? So one of my favorite stories, and of course, no names, no identifying information. We did have an individual who came to us my first summer, and he struggled. We barely got him out of treatment. Right? We barely got him through treatment. And while he was with us, he had a number of behaviors that we really wanted to address, but we couldn't because we were walking on eggshells with him sometimes. He leaves, goes to sober living, and he comes back to us within a year. Right? He comes back to us completely surrendered, says, "I'm going to listen. I'm going to do things differently." Okay. We send him off after treatment to his sober living. And I'm still hearing, actually, I got an update from him about him last week. Yeah. He has a job. He's going through school, all things that he said that he couldn't do the first time that he came through. And what he says, and I remember talking with him as he was leaving our facility, that he found that he can trust himself, that he knows that what he can do, and he can keep himself accountable, and he can allow others to hold him accountable as well. And his confidence is increased. And it's great to hear stories like that, because frankly, we also will hear the difficult ones, but that story reminds me that there is hope for not just for the parents, but for the patients that come through us. They're going to be able to find their way in this, in their recovery. Yeah.
That's wonderful. And I hear those stories every single day with adolescents going into residential treatment like Karen, that's CARON.org, and coming out and succeeding. We have been very lucky in this country to be blessed with some really great treatment and some really great recovery coaches, right, Dr. Pat?
Yeah, no, and that's why I really wanted you to speak to some of those services that we have now found. The science of them is so instrumental. And, to really be out in front and really recognize things like EMDR or neurofeedback or other, I mean, there's even something on there for spiritual journey. That's important. That's what puts you all really at the top of the list. And I want to congratulate you for having that wisdom and that insight into understanding that this is a changing landscape and you all have changed to address it. The other thing I wanted to thank you for is very few of the places that I've looked at have LGBTQAI plus right there. I can't thank you all enough. Thank you, Ellen, right?
Yeah.
You're welcome. Karen holds a very, very special place in my heart. And I always do want to bring the professionals to treatment. And I want to be able to show everybody that there are wonderful places out there. I want to bring them to your attention. So if you're looking for Karen, it's CARON.org. If you're looking for me, it's pushybroadfromthebronx.com, 800-889-1757. I'm here to give you a free consultation if you like, and certainly here for resources. I'm so glad to be beginning my third year doing Recovery Recharge with you, Dr. Pat. We're really doing a great job together.
I love it. I can't thank you enough. And I love the support of our audience here. And I just want to say one thing for the audience, to both of you. This is a field that it's okay not to know what you don't know. It is really okay, because the three of us, we know that you don't know what you don't know. But the end game is we will make sure we put you in front of people that do know. And this is not a one size fits all. So get a hold of Ellen, because even if she is not that person, she will send you to Dr. Grant or wherever that is, because that's what we've signed up for. We've signed up to help you, your family, your spouses, your children, because you can beat this.